showcase webinar being presented by UT Southwestern on EHR-Based specialty registry. This is a Davies Award-winning use case for the value of health IT. My name is Arnold Simmons. I'm the Manager of Quality and Patient Safety, and it's my pleasure to moderate this presentation. Core to the use of health IT to improve the quality of healthcare delivery. HIMSS promotes and advocates the integration of clinical decision support and best practice guidance, access clinical data to analyze progress, and IT-enabled patient safety tools for all healthcare organizations, clinicians, patients, and community members as vehicles for improving patient outcomes. The HIMSS Nicholas E. Davies Award of Excellence is the pinnacle of the HIMSS Value Recognition Program. Outstanding achievement of organizations from around the world who have utilized health information technology to improve patient outcomes and value. The Davies Award-winning use cases have been peer-reviewed to validate sustainable, improved patient and business outcomes resulting from health IT-enabled care delivery. So it's my pleasure to welcome our speakers for today's webinar.
Hi, my name is Dwayne Willett. I'm the CMIO at UT Southwestern, and pleased to be able to share this case with you today on EHR-based specialty registries. UT Southwestern Health System is a large academic medical center in Dallas, Texas. Our main university hospital, Clements University Hospital, is 604 beds. We have approximately 1,700 physicians in our faculty practice and over 40 specialty clinics, and are in a period of growth to expand medical care services across the Dallas-Fort Worth area. We are in partnership with Texas Health Resources in a clinically integrated network to serve the patients in the area. The problem we're addressing in this case is we were asked to provide quality metrics for every specialty department in our faculty practice. When we looked at that, we realized that was going to represent an enormous amount of work. We had done quality measures on a small scale and registries on a small scale, which took a fairly lengthy period of time to deliver, and so this was going to be a large challenge for us. And how we approach that is the subject of today's case. The speakers today, in addition to myself, will be Josh Youngblood, Director of our Electronic Medical Record, and Dr. Jason Fish, Associate Vice President over Ambulatory Quality. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Fish to set up the problem for the case today.
Thank you, Dr. Willett. So, as everyone may know, the country is moving towards value-based care and population health delivery, partly from patients desiring that, but also from payers demanding that that is how we deliver care. And our healthcare delivery system has largely still been focused on primary care national programs. We are heavily involved in Meaningful Use Stage 2, patient-centered medical home, and we are an accountable care organization involved in several different contracts. But as the movement is moving towards value-based care and population health, and we are an academic center, we really needed to think about how to bring our specialists into something that has largely been a primary care domain. So in order for us to do that, we needed to think about specialty populations, and specifically focusing on registries of those patients that fit into those diseases or conditions that our specialists primarily focus their energy on. And in doing so, it helps us deliver better care through thinking about care gaps that might be identified through these registries. It helps us identify performance improvement opportunities through metrics, as well as, since we are an academic center, allowing us to think about clinical research as we identify these populations of patients. And then lastly, it helps us demonstrate value externally, because as we focus on a population of patients throughout these practices, we were able to engage with national registries to include our data as part of those for benchmarking purposes. Now, in order for us to think about how to approach this, we needed to bring together 4 key groups of individuals and practices to think about how we would organize and operationalize what we are trying to do. Those 4 groups are quality, operations, information resources, and analytics. And by doing that, we built a shared understanding of how we would approach this and how we would operationalize that, which we believe would make it easier and faster to do. But it also helped us improve the chances of choosing solutions that would work for our practices. By having operations right there at the table, we understood what our current workflows were and any workflows that we needed to change or redesign. By having quality there to focus on the metrics, IT to be at the table to develop the tools that we needed, and analytics to make sure that what we were measuring was being captured as well as putting together the actual results in a meaningful manner. The other piece of that that's important here is by bringing those 4 together, they served as the governance group to identify the measures that we are interested in, the populations that we are interested in, and making sure that it aligned with what the health system's goals were, as well as to make sure that we have the resources necessary to be able to do what we are being asked to do.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Fish. What I'm going to talk about next is the design approach that we embarked on to achieve the vision that Dr. Fish has outlined, particularly to design both for the clinical workflows and for the extraction of data at the same time. To go into this, we adopted some guiding principles, and one of the first was to capture data as a byproduct of care of the patient. The clinicians and staff are very busy, and so we wanted to reinforce optimal use of the EHR and avoid adding on additional steps. Along that line, we adopted a repeatable and standard set of tools and data extraction. So rather than each project being a one-off, we wanted to create a framework where we could use the same set of types of EHR structures over and over again. And we needed to do this leveraging our existing technology toolkit. We have an enterprise electronic health record, which is EPIC, a patient portal that comes along with that, MyChart, and our enterprise data warehouse, which we have built using Microsoft SQL Server. And a final guiding principle that fits with the above is that we set out from the start to have no manual abstraction. We realized in the world we're entering with increasing numbers of specialty registries and measures for the value-based care that would not be a scalable approach. So as we looked at what constituted a registry, there were 3 key questions that we needed to ask at a minimum to start. So one was to answer the question from a physician standpoint, who are my patients? And as we looked at each of these questions, the approach we did was to assess what in the real world is the important information that we're trying to gather, and then where is the optimal location electronically to store that information so we can enter it once and reuse it over and over again. So in our EMR, there's a concept of the care team, which stores provider-patient relationships that span more than one encounter, and we chose that as the place to enter this information. Really, the next question is one of the most important, which is what defines a registry. And in an AHRQ guide, 2 registries, they stress that most fall into one of 2 categories: patients that share a common condition or patients that share a common exposure, which could be either to a procedure, for example, or to a medication. For common conditions, again, in the real world, we asked ourselves, where should we store a given patient's active health or medical issues, and settled on the problem list as being the core place where those should reside. And then similarly for surgeries and medications, the obvious choices were the surgical history and the medication history in the EHR. Finally, the third question was, what do our specialists want to know about my registry patient? So from the work that Dr. Fish and his team did to elicit specialty conditions of interest, the next question was, how would you know that you're taking good care of those patients and what would constitute good outcomes, which led to measures, both process and outcome measures. From those then, in English terms, we asked, what would define who's in the numerator, who's in the denominator, and anyone that would be excluded, and then drilled down from there into specific data fields that would allow us to calculate those numbers. As we looked at the places to store, to collect that data, in the EHR, we divided the data fields into two types, standard data fields and custom data fields. Standard data fields were, as you would expect, fields that were already being collected in the EHR or for which there was a standard place to do so, such as age, medication problems, and so forth. What we knew going in was that for specialty-specific conditions, there would be additional data elements that would be needed that would be custom. Clinic actions that would be taken or clinician assessments particular to a given treatment. And our approach here was to standardize on a set of 4 methods within the EHR to collect that data. So there could be multiple tools, and as we'll see, we ended up with a large number of tools, but the EHR constructs to build those tools focused on these 4, which were documentation flow sheets, often used by nurses and clinic medical assistants, and then custom data elements that could be presented in forms to physicians. We also used result components, and then for patient-reported outcomes, patient-entered questionnaires. And this decision proved key because we were able to then make a decision up front to extract these 4 data elements in total into our enterprise data warehouse. And so that as we went from clinic to clinic, we knew that if we used these data elements, the data would be in the data warehouse and available for metric calculation. Here's an example of a patient-entered questionnaire in our EHR. This is a rheumatology assessment assessing a disease burden on the patient. That same information, once it's been stored, entered by the patient, flows directly into the EHR and into a health assessment questionnaire, which can be pre-populated with the patient's answers. There's additional section for provider assessment, and then this all flows into the note, again, limiting rework by both the patient and the provider. We built, in many cases, best practice advisories or other clinical decision support to help support collection of the data and also to form desired actions. In this case, our rheumatologist had indicated a best practice was to consider disease-modifying agents on all patients with rheumatoid arthritis. And so following this simple decision tree on the left, as we identified patients who had rheumatoid arthritis, in the system we asked if they were already on one of these agents. If not, then a simple reminder screen showed where the physician could either indicate a reason for exclusion or jump directly into the prescribing module. From that last example, that was just one condition, and again, we were tasked with over 40 specialties. So that led us to realize we were going to need to develop a large number of EHR tools, and in order to design those effectively, that led us into the practice of agile modeling. And this is really a fairly simple concept. In general, it's been said there are 2 main reasons to engage in modeling for design up front or during development, and that is to better understand what you're doing or what you're building, and then also to communicate that among the team, the 4 groups that was mentioned, and across time to other people who may want to support the build in the future. So agile modeling is really just a way of saying that how to do this in a lightweight fashion that allows you to get a high value for the degree of effort that you expend, and incorporates some simple practices, mostly around developing with simple tools and developing models with others. So we made great use of whiteboards, both electronic and physical whiteboards, and, for example, just taking simple photos of those to capture the model so we can proceed in rapid cycle iteration. Some examples of diagrams include the one you see here, which is a use case diagram for an osteoporosis registry. In this particular case, it shows the actions or verbs of the system organized by role. And on this one screen, we can see that there are 3 different alerts, for example, that will be part of this build and allows us to track which ones will be displayed to which clinical roles. In sum, we found a fairly limited number of model types allowed us to express most of the design elements we needed for all these specialty registries. And I'm not going to read through this table here, but we've already seen examples of use case diagram and decision tree, and we found swim lane workflow diagrams also very helpful for repetitive or repeating sequential flows. And with that, I'm going to turn the microphone over to Josh Youngblood to talk about the Agile project management methods that we employed on this project.
So we were given a big challenge from our quality folks to tell us to implement this project in such a short time frame. But we had other challenges that we needed to overcome in order to make this project successful. So one of the first challenges is we had 30% of my staff were new application analysts. We hired people from UT Systems HIT program and directly hired people straight from college and trained them to be application analysts. And at the time of this request, I had about 30% of my people were just out of that program, and we were training them up to be application analysts. The second issue was we already had a 6 to 9 month backlog of projects that were slated to work that we need to work this project into and still complete all those projects on the same time frame. So that increased our requirements for this project. We also were not allowed initially to have any new staff for this project. We had to use existing staffing to get this project and our 6 month backlog done at the same time. The other edict was that we would not have any slowdown or stoppage in our current work process. We couldn't tell other teams that they couldn't get what was promised to them delivered on time because we were working on the quality project. We also had a 30% failure rate for our project work in the past, and we were trying to work that failure rate down, but we knew we had to significantly decrease that failure rate in order to be successful in both the quality project and our existing backlog. And then our prior performance, we had only done 2 quality projects in the last 2 years, so to have to do 40-plus quality projects in less than a year's time was a significant ask for us at that time. And so we were concerned that our prior performance would not let us be successful. But we had to meet all these challenges in order to get to goal and to have our quality projects to be successful. So what work methodology do we choose in order to help us be successful as a project? In looking at different work methodologies, we found that the sweet spot for what we were trying to do, we have clinical processes are very complex, and the EMR is very complex. So when you're talking about using a methodology to get work done in a short, fast time frame, Agile methodologies work best within that complex time frame and complex processes. So we decided that we're going to continue to use our Agile process, which we had just started a year before, and work the Agile process with these new project requests. And so how are we going to get that accomplished? So first we have to have some guiding principles. So when you look at our Agile manifesto, although both sides of the graph are important, the information on the right is more important to us in an Agile process and workflow than the other side. So we really want to concentrate on individual interactions versus processes and tools. And we want to be able to have a working product at the end of our design sessions and our quick turnaround 2-week iteration cycles so that versus comprehensive documentation. So as Dr. Willett had showed examples before, we use whiteboards to document our flows and processes instead of having someone spend 10 or 12 hours documenting it in Visio and making it look pretty. We were trying to be fast and agile with that approach. We want customer collaboration. We want to provide customers with what they need instead of trying to do contact negotiation with the customer. We want them to be asking for the data in the way that works best for them. And we want to be able to respond quickly to change. We don't want to follow a strict plan. If we need to extend one iteration for a project to make it right, we're flexible enough to do those kinds of things. So, and when we originally went our Agile journey, we did it because of our high failure rate, which we were trying to decrease, as well as that traditional waterfall methods were not working for us at all. And so Agile helped us be more effective in that. So what does our Agile framework really look like? So our Agile Scrum methodology framework, we have our inputs from our customer, quality, and other customers that we rank in the backlog. We take those ranked backlog stories, and our management team actually sizes the stories and preps them for iteration. Once the information is placed in iteration, during that 2-week iteration cycle, the team scrums every day and talks about 3 things. They want to know, what are you working on today? Are you on time with what you're working on? Do you need any help from anybody else on the team? Or do you need to escalate any issues that you're having? So we don't wait until the end of the 2-week cycle to find out we had issues. Every day we know whether we have issues and we can intervene quicker. Once that iteration cycle is over and the work is finished, we do a sprint review, which is essentially an overview of what's going to production during this 2-week iteration. And then we do a retrospective to set how well did we work during this iteration and what were some of our issues that we had and how do we resolve them so we don't have those issues again. So this framework helps us work through our 2-week iteration process so that we can be facile and get things done in a more timely fashion, but also learn from our mistakes so that we don't repeat them again. And so we get better and better as we go through the cycle. So what really helps with the Agile methodology is user stories. User stories are extremely important. So a user story is just a quick statement as a whatever the role of the person is, I want whatever they want so that a benefit can achieve. So the reason that the user stories are very good is they're very lightweight. Everybody can understand and read them, from the developers, stakeholders, or users. It focuses on what the customer value is to be delivered. So it's the who, what, and why, all in one sentence. And a good example is, as a rheumatologist, I want to be advised if my patient with rheumatoid arthritis, RA, is not on a disease-modifying anti-rheumatic drug, DMARD, so that my patient receive optimal therapy for their RA and can experience the best possible improvement in their symptoms and quality of life. And note that the so that portion also leads naturally to designing a measures for effectiveness. We can measure the quality of life prior to the implementation of this measure and after to see if we're actually improving the quality of life of the patient. So that portion helps you to get what measures can be done from that user story. What makes a good user story? So you can use the BEST acronym to make user story. One, it needs to be independent. Each story has to be independent on its own. If you have a bigger story that needs to be broken down into 2 stories, you want to break them down into 2 independent stories so that they can produce value on their own. They need to be negotiable. So until the story goes into iteration, there can be a discussion between the requester and the analyst, the builder, on what the story is, trying to iron out exactly what the customer needs and wants from that story. Once it's placed in iteration, then that story is locked down until the end of that iteration. But before it's in iteration, there's a discussion that goes back and forth. It needs to produce value to the stakeholder. If the story is not producing value, then why are we working on it? So you've got to make sure you have value out of that story. And it needs to be estimatable. I need to understand from the story itself how big a process this is going to be and how much time it's going to take from the analyst so that I can slot enough work in iteration per analyst. They need to be small enough to fit in an iteration or 2 so that we can get them done and move on to other things. And they need to be testable. So I need to be able to test to make sure that I'm meeting the requirements of the customer. And the easy way to do that is that you have to have both the user story and acceptance criteria. The acceptance criteria is a definition of done from the customer, user, or stakeholder's perspective. And it can really just be a bulleted list of items that you want to do. If it's a best practice advisory, like Dr. Willett suggested earlier, who is the best practice advisory going to fire for? Are there going to be any ways for the clinician to get around the best practice advisory? Is it going to point them to somewhere else, such as order entry, in order to order something for the patient? Are we going to have a preferences queued up for them to order that information for the patient? And so that's how the user storing acceptance criteria work to produce a good process for increasing your productivity. So what are the benefits that you get out of user story and acceptance criteria? First, it's always written in the voice of the customer, expressing business value. So remember, if there's no value in doing it, why are we doing it? It facilitates a discussion between the builder and the customer. So that story is a good starting point for the analyst who's working on the project to work with the clinician to really understand what they're trying to get out of that enhancement. It's also a solid overview of what the customer is expecting, so when we get down to delivering the product, there's no guessing about what's expected to be delivered. It ensures that both the customers and the analysts are on the same page, and that leadership understands what we're trying to do as well, so everybody is on the same page. And it provides the builder with a definition of what's considered to be done. That acceptance criteria is my checklist to say, did my people get all their work done, and did they get it done to meet the requirements of the customer? And lastly, it's agreed upon by the customer and the builder before it goes into iteration, so everybody's on the same page, and that helps us get to our goal of completing our processes in a faster time and meeting the customer's expectations. How did we get all this done? What kind of infrastructure do we have to have in place to make this all happen? So we have three big pieces of infrastructure. So one is our EMR, which is Epic. And then we use CA Technologies Agile Central as our web-based agile development software. The software helped us to really hone in on what we were working on, as well as give visibility to our customers. They can log in and see what we're working on any given iteration, what's planned for future iterations, so they can help us prioritize our work better. And then we needed an enterprise data warehouse, one to store data that was captured within the EMR and from patient questionnaires, but also for calculations that were too sophisticated for us to do within our electronic medical record, to send those calculations back into Epic real time. So the source of truth for the clinician is always the EMR. They don't have to go outside the EMR to get data that they need to care for the patient. So that's the IT infrastructure that we use to get this process going. The next thing we needed was some really good governance structure. So we have 5 main governance groups that help IT prioritize and deliver this functionality. We have the Enterprise Data Warehouse and Steering Committee, and that helps us to make sure that the data that we need to capture these quality measures are in the data warehouse and can be extracted to the data warehouse, whether it be in a workbench report or whether it's real-time back to the clinician for feedback. And we needed the Health System Business Rules Group. That business rule group helps us decide what is the source of truth for values within the system, so that we're not having 15 different values for the same criteria in the system. And so when that data, that helps us to hone in on values and make it, enter it once and reuse it over and over again. So we have also the Health System EHR Governance Group and the groups that fall underneath it. So we have ambulatory governance, which help us to support our ambulatory operations and to make sure that they are vetting all of our clinical processes and changes that go into ambulatory and having governance over those changes. We also have hospital governance that does the same thing for the hospital side. And then we also have clinical decision support group. That clinical decision support group is essential for understanding what clinical decision support we have. We try to do clinical decision support with people and not to people, so they have to be involved in those decisions and request clinical support from us. And then we also monitor that clinical decision support once it goes live to make sure it's having the desired effect. If it's not having the desired effect, we look, do we need to modify that clinical decision support? Is it firing for the wrong person? Or is it not giving the proper follow-up actions for the customer to do? Or is it just not working at all when it needs to be redesigned? So that we always monitor both before, during, and after to make sure that those things are working. So what was the overall benefit for Agile development? So the benefit for Agile development, it promotes shared understanding with the customer and analyst on what's being delivered. It really helps us do short time box segments of providing work to the production so that we can actually enhance care of the patients continuously and produce work continuously for our customers so they don't have to wait months and months for things to go to production. It helps us to evolve to evolving requirements. We have the ability to quickly, let's say we have an issue like Ebola comes up, we have the ability to quickly change our priorities and get things done and put in production quickly for those kind of emergencies, but we still does not impact our rapid cycle development for our standard operation, our standard work that's going on. And it really improves clinical collaboration because at all points of the cycle of the build, the clinicians are available for us to work with and make sure that we're actually moving in the right direction. So we have less rebuild in the end because we're up front getting that information ahead of time. What's our true return on investment? So looking at our Agile principles and our return on investment, we started our Agile in the third quarter of 2013, and this is our workload from that time frame mapped out. And the green line here is our total projects completed within that time frame. So in the third quarter of 2013, we weren't doing very well, 50 projects per quarter, but we started our Agile rollout then, and we were able to increase it. Once we started in the third quarter of 2014, we added the CA technology, the application to review our work online as well as share our work with our customers, and our productivity increased during the registry project. So we had a 75% increase of productivity during the registry project and a 35% increase in the number of actual requests during that time frame. But we also had, which was really great, was a reduce in our fault failure by 50%. So we dramatically reduced our fault failure, so when we did send a product to production, we had less issues with those products so that we could concentrate on the next enhancements and not have to actually rework a lot of those projects, which helped us to meet our goal. And what was some of our financial return on investment for using Agile methodology? So if we, prior to Agile, our Agile methodologies were using waterfall technique, and we needed to finish 163 projects, which is what we did during the Agile process with this quality project. We would have to have increased our staffing by 26 FTEs in order to do it based on our prior volume of work, which would be hugely significant. The other soft benefit that we achieved out of moving to an Agile methodology is we reduced our time to delivery. So we have 2-week cycles, and sometimes we end up having to put two-week cycles together to get product to production. But that's 2 to 4 weeks to production versus in the past where it would be 6 to 9 months. And our overall quality also increased. So we were able to increase our quality as well during that time frame. So that meant that we had less rework to do, which helped us to continue to produce more work out. What were some of the operational benefits that we achieved from this? So one was visibility. Our stakeholders have visibility to review the workload that we're currently working on. They knew the processes that we're currently doing. They could also prioritize our work in the past. So if we were the future work, they could prioritize future work, and they were aware of what was going on in the future so that they could reorganize it if they needed to get something to the head of the line if it needed to be done sooner, such as like an Ebola outbreak or some other SARS or anything like that. The other thing we're allowed to do is plan our backlog a little better and reprioritize our backlog based on needs of the organization as well as needs of our different governance groups, which is highly beneficial for the entire process. So Agile methodology helped us to increase our benefits to the customer as well as increase our productivity and awareness of what we're working on. So with all this said, Dr. Fisher is going to talk a little bit about our true outcomes from our quality measures.
Thank you, Josh. So at the end of the first year, as Josh mentioned, there was a tremendous uphill lift to get done, but we're happy to report that through using this methodology, we were able to develop over 30, we developed over 40 registries, about 43 registries across 30 specialties. We built 111 EHR tools, We developed 163 measures, had 32 dashboards, and we monitored the number of unique patients that were affected or benefited from this project, which was over 60,000 patients. And as an aside, since we're trying to capture the voice of the patient in this as well, we had over 2,100 patient-reported outcome questionnaires completed. To date, we have over 52 registries with clinical quality measures and 81 total registries. And we have now over 80,000 unique patients that are actively managed on that. And we have about 8,500 patient-reported outcome questionnaires completed, which is about 3,000 patients total. To show you how this project really benefited on the front line, in the OB-GYN clinic, after someone delivers a baby, it's important to check for postpartum depression. And so our clinic was very interested in making sure they standardized that process and collected that patient-reported outcome. And so you can see here, from the beginning of the project to the present day, they've really dramatically increased from 34.7% completion rate of the questionnaire now up to 71.1%, which really helps us now screen in a standardized process for depression and hopefully capture true depression in women who are postpartum so that we can manage those effectively. Another example is in the rheumatoid arthritis, as we showed you earlier, the quality measure processes involved in that. And so you see at the top here in the yellow line, it's our DMARD compliance rate, which went from 96.3% to 98.6%. And if you kind of flip that around in a defect, it's really greater than a 50% reduction from 3.7 to 1.4% in terms of opportunities missed in this process. The second is the patient-reported outcome and the physician-reported assessment. And so you see there that the assessment has gone from 42% to 81% in terms of the assessment. Now, those in of themselves are process measures, and we're making sure that we're standardizing our data collection as well as making sure that patients are taking the appropriate medications. But where the real money here is for us and the benefit to our patients is really when you look at the CDI score severity index. And it's broken down into low and high. And so when you see here in the next two, the red and the black, you see that through standardizing our processes, paying attention to it, measuring it, and working with our patients, ensuring that they are getting the appropriate care, we're seeing that the number of patients with low disease severity has increased, and the number of patients with high disease activity has decreased, which we see that as true marker of the success of this program.
Thank you, Dr. Fish. So just in summary then, some take-home messages from this case that we found was a high value from using agile modeling for allowing us to understand and communicate about a complex series of projects in a timely way. And then the use of agile project management methods and principles to deliver valued and high-quality EHR features early and often on a 2 to 4 week cycle. And we also found validation in this case of the concept of being able to move away from the world of manual abstraction to using our investment in electronic health record for concomitant data collection with a view towards quality measure production at the end of the day, and being able to deliver EHR-based registries that have helped us to improve care processes and outcomes. To fit this picture of our Davies submission, what we've talked about in this case is the use of modeling to help us plan as we go through this iterative cycle, and agile project management methods to actually deliver working product into production. Employing a data warehouse for studying what we do, and automated error detection to complete plan, do, study, act cycle in our vision of a learning health system. we'd be happy to hear from you, and there's additional information that's now been published as well. Thank you.
That great presentation, and would like to remind the viewers where to go find other Davies, this and other Davies use case webinars, recordings that they may be interested in. That information could be found on the HIMSS Davies Award website at HIMSS.org/Davies. Thanks again for joining us today.